Thanks for tuning in to Bite Size Book Reviews. This book is called Tidal Creatures by Seanan McGuire. So a little bit about the world first. This is a pretty wildly magical kind of universe. It seems to have fairly the range of supernatural things that people think of in different cultures and stuff, but the important part for this particular story is that it's a version of the universe where the world kind of altered itself in order to fit into the things that people believed. So gods and goddesses exist because people believe in them, and because many different cultures have many different versions of different gods and goddesses, all of these different versions have manifested over time in some form or another, and how common they are depends on how well known they are, how many people believe in them or recognize their names. So the focus of this book are the moon gods and goddesses, also called lunars. So I mentioned how so things like their power and how common they are depend on how well known they are, because it's not just one single person. For whatever reason, these gods and goddesses often appear it's one consciousness that spreads out through many different people, because you can't squeeze all the powers and stuff of a god into a single human and expect it to go well. So, for instance, a really famous goddess would be Artemis from Greek mythology. And because she is very famous and very well known, there are many, many copies of her. And how it works is when a human who is compatible with the god, things they have the right kind of personality, a lot of the things that resonate, they at some point in their lives will hear the moon speaking to them. The moon essentially asks them whether they are willing to become part of it, or to allow it to become part of them, and they take on the aspect of that goddess, and their job is to basically they have the regular world, and then they have this place they call the impossible city, which the book describes as some type of heart of the universe or whatever, and it's the job of the moon gods and goddesses to go there every night to basically be the moon, above the city. But it's not just one person, it's all the different gods and goddesses whose turn it is that night goes there and sort of joins together to become the one entity that passes for the moon that night. And that's something that they do, but each person also does pick up some specific powers and abilities depending on what people originally believed about that particular god or goddess. So since Artemis is well known, there are many versions of her all around the world, and whatever it's not really clear about, I guess, when their turns are, who decides, who goes to the city that night or not, and how all that works, but that's the basic concept of it. The main focus for this particular book in terms of the gods and goddesses are three different lunars, one called Mani that I'm not super familiar with, Artemis, and Chang'e. So she's from Chinese cultural mythology. I wouldn't really call her a goddess, actually. I feel this book is a bit misleading in that regard. I don't think she's a figure that people exactly worship. It's more accurate to say she's a celestial being than a god, but I don't really think there's a really good English translation for what the concept is in Chinese. Whatever, I'm getting kind of nitpicky about it, but she is well known. So she and Artemis are the really well known ones, so there's often versions of them in various cities, but in this case they are in Berkeley. All three of these human counterparts are students there, but something is going wrong, and so Chang'e's human half, I guess, here is called Judy. So she and Mani's person are two of the first people to notice that something is going wrong, and they primarily notice because when he's coming back from one of the nights when he is supposed to cross the sky and so on, he brings with him the dead body of another lunar. So they are not immortal. They can live for a very, very long time and stay young if they hit up one of the gods or goddesses that have, immortality related abilities, like Chang'e with the peaches that she tends, and, gets some assistance from them, but they are not, like, they're not immune to damage, and they don't technically live forever unless they, like, work really hard at it, by the sound of it. So, yeah, they find the dead body of a, like, fellow lunar, and it looks like she may have been murdered. And it's, somewhat inconceivable, like, well, both because, she is a goddess and because of where and how she died. Like, it seems as though she may have died in this in-between space between the regular human world and the impossible city, and that's, somewhere that not a lot of people have access to. And on top of that, she's stuck, like, partway between transformations. Like, she's still goddess enough that her blood is silver, like, as well as red. So this is a pretty major concern, and Judy in particular starts to look into it, because as one of the senior goddesses, one of the more powerful ones, and also a really responsible person, like, she feels like it's her job both to, take care of the other lunars in the area, and also to, figure out, like, what exactly is going on so that they don't end up losing more people. Like, this is really suspicious, and it's, getting her very concerned. At the same time, a version of Artemis has come to the city, chasing rumors. Well, not rumors, I guess, but chasing possibilities, I guess, regarding other deaths that have occurred with lunars. Like, it's not just the one in Berkeley that was killed. Like, it has happened to other, usually minor gods and goddesses pretty much all around the world. So it's a much bigger issue than Judy originally thought. And she doesn't really find this out until she starts talking with some of the other more high-ranking, I guess, gods and goddesses. So this is primarily a murder mystery, but it also goes into this underlying conflict going on between, I guess, a lot of the more supernatural world and the alchemists in this world. So it's a kind of stuck-up, self-centered, evil organization full of people who think that they can find a way to essentially become gods themselves. So in the purposes of this book, like, they want to control the impossible city, because it's implied that for whatever reason, if you can control the city, that you can somehow control what the world looks like including being able to rewrite universal laws, or, like, change how humans work and stuff like that. How all that is really supposed to work is kind of unclear, but that is their major goal, and it plays a pretty big role, I guess, in the plot of this story and how it unfolds. So some of the other main characters include, one of the bad guys, which is, one of the annoying things, like one of the alchemists, and then one of their constructs, since part of their endeavor to control this impossible city included, like, creating other supernatural entities for reasons that I will not get into because it's too complicated. But one of them got away. Like, her maker essentially told her to run when she knew that she herself was probably going to get killed. So this construct escapes out into the rest of, like, the real world, I suppose, out of her lab, and now has to figure out what it means for her. Like, what does it mean to her that she was constructed? What does it mean that she now wants to, live as herself? And, what would it mean to try to be a real person? Like, and how she fits into this grand scheme of things. And now that she has the ability to decide for herself who she wants to be, she also has to re-examine, like, a lot of ethical questions around the activities that she participated in, whether or not she was aware at the time that it was something bad. And I guess her line is interesting because it really dives into that concept. Sometimes people do some really evil things because the people in charge tell them to, and they don't stop to question, like, the ethics of it. And, that doesn't make it less wrong. Like, it's something that people, like, she has to come to grips with and figure out so that she can move forward and start being like the kind of person that she actually wants to be, and to figure out where her future is going to go. So something I liked. I think the setup with the gods and goddesses was really interesting. Like, I kind of wish it gone more into that. Like, I like the way people's beliefs, shape their abilities, and also just the kind of loose network they have for supporting each other. Like, it was kind of funny to me that, so they talked about, how there's this one goddess that makes the keys they use to open the gate between, like, our world and the intervening space and the impossible city. And they're like, so this one goddess, she's not one of the ones that comes around very frequently, so whenever a version of her comes around, she makes these keys that they all keep and pass around and keep safe, because like until she comes around again, like they can't really get anyone to replace it. But they have all these little support systems and networks and customs, I guess, in order to help each other out, like as people enter this sort of odd community that spans like across the world. Like, a lot of these little tidbits of how they live and how they work with each other was really kind of amusing and interesting to me. But something I did not like. So this story was written in third person present tense, and like, I already tend to dislike present tense, but combined with the fact that I think it often had this type of writing style where it wanted to be like a little philosophical and a little theoretical or whatever, and I found the combination slightly annoying, I guess. Like, I really didn't like the writing style. It made it really difficult for me to get into. Like, it took a while for me to really immerse myself, I guess, in the story and what was going on. And finally, I guess just a heads up that a lot of the bad guys and like what they do in this book is pretty gruesome. Like, I mean, like the literally melting people down and using them as parts for their experiments type of gruesome, like among other things, and that's always a downside for me.